Welcome everyone to episode 3 of the Training Ground, a insight into employability support and strategies during the current pandemic. And really pleased to have with me today Pete Ward, who is the Deputy CEO at Leadership Through Sport and Business. Pete, thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate it. And we're going to be talking around interviews. We know at this time it's changed quite a lot around interviews. Obviously, it's going to be very remote in terms of the experiences that a lot of people will be having. But firstly, how's it been for you? How's this time been during the pandemic?
Yeah, I think everybody's going through the same conversations. How you doing? Same as always. Very little has changed. I think a lot of people are jumping into working from home in particular. I mean, what we do is we find work for bright young people from disadvantaged backgrounds. So probably the biggest adjustment we're making is right now, a lot of people are holding their breath around recruitment, waiting to find out what happens next. And so from the work that we're doing, it's about continuing to support our young people, making sure they're healthy, they're ready, and preparing them for a world where they're interviewing through webcams rather than going in person.
Fantastic. And that must be, I mean, for the young people you work with, must be very different, challenging, awkward and exciting.
Yeah, I think, bearing in mind the nature of the work we do, we also have to talk about what the sort of structural difficulties are here. If you're the eldest of 5 and your parents are working and school isn't happening, and you're also effectively co-parenting, you're looking after your little brothers and sisters, where is that quiet room where you can go do things? Where's that opportunity to prepare and maybe get ready for an interview? Technology isn't equally distributed. Not everybody has the luxury of a laptop with a webcam as opposed to on their phone. And what we're doing when we talk to employers is thinking about what is important here. What's the difference between someone giving an interview on their phone, the best they can with the best technology they have, and what would it mean to sort of make people have a laptop? What opportunities are you denying there? So we do sort of education piece in both directions, letting employers know where this is going to be harder for some people, people that ultimately they want to hire but don't fully understand the background, then also letting our young people know this is going to be harder, which just means you need to be better prepared.
Brilliant. And obviously, you've had a long career journey so far, especially within the charity sector. Can you talk us through maybe a bit about your journey and I guess some of the things you've picked up on interviews from maybe your teenage years going right the way through to obviously the position that you are in now?
So bearing in mind all the things I've learned later on, the thing I learned for myself as a young person is every interview you go for is the only job you've ever wanted. And that's the way you have to approach it, because that's what employers are looking for. When you say, well, I'm waiting for another thing to come. Well, really, I want to be a footballer, but I'm just doing this part-time. Those sort of answers are very clear ways of getting rid of candidates. And I think when you look back at overconfident teenage behavior, you're going to pay me is absolutely the wrong answer to give. My career sort of moved from being a sports coach, so I worked as a community coach for England Rugby, through to sort of more corporate backgrounds, now working in a charity to prepare young people for corporate environments. And so I've got a sense of what it means to interview as a community coach, which is very different from what it would be to prepare yourself to be interviewed by Grant Thornton or EY, or one of the major sort of financial institutions. And I know, presumably there are people going to be watching this who are, deeply passionate about sport and would really love to get that coaching job. I mean, the good interviews are when there's an opportunity to show your knowledge. And I think that's harder occasionally with, say, accountancy than it is with football coaching.
Yeah.
There's a group of young people.
Yeah, definitely.
Develop knowledge, push them. And you've gone through these sort of things as well, haven't you?
I was going to say that even for myself, in terms of definitely coaching interviews, you can plan, you've got the stages of what you're going to say, the knowledge, when you're going to bring it out. But like you said, in terms of, for example, accountancy, it can be a bit more challenging as to how you're able to do that. And there's going to be a vast amount of jobs that people will be interviewing for, obviously tech jobs as well, digital jobs, which seem to be on the rise as well, in the current climate. So how do you navigate that? What would you say then? What are some of the tips, I guess?
Yeah, for interviewing in corporates in general, basically it's be as over professional as you be as over prepared as you can be. Dressing up, for example, thinking about your environment behind you. Now, I have lots of books behind me, which is how I hide the fact I can't read very well. I just buy books and hope no one asks any questions about them. But my backdrop here is far more important than I may have considered.
Yeah.
If there's things in there that I probably didn't want my employers to know that I did. So it's about having a sort of critical view of that environment and thinking about, if I were to look completely fairly at my backdrop, you've got a great backdrop there, absolutely nothing you can infer from you. You're in that like floating white cube that you're in. That just makes you the focal point. But where there's an opportunity, I think, when you're competing is people are using that backdrop to communicate about themselves, and whether actually, if you have an environment with lots of books you care deeply about reading, like that's maybe something that would be useful for them to know. There's like a bit behind you that helps your argument. And so you have to think, I think, strategically in that way.
I think that's a great point as well. Like you said, I think that's one of the tips I really want those who are watching, who are going to watch this, to really understand, let your background communicate, in part who you are. Obviously, you're not going to have a massive poster saying this is, who I draw your attention to here, but subtle things, like you say.
I mean, that happens when you're having a conversation with people anyway. One of the things we advise our young people to do is if you know who's interviewing you, find out about them. And while I think there's a natural inclination from, lots of people, very reasonably, to be like, feels a little bit stalkery, that's exactly the people you're competing against are doing that. I have this interviewer, I looked them up, turns up they're a big Arsenal fan. That's the thing I might want to work in there, so that, again, that level of strategic thinking, which I think a lot of people bring to interviews, we're trying to make sure that everybody going for a job knows that. And your backdrop is your opportunity for them to say, so for example, my partner's plants in the background, oh, you might really like plants, whatever that would be. And it's just a way of making a human connection. Interviews, whether in person or over a webcam, are about human connections. People want people who can do the job, but they want to work with people with whom they can get on. And, again, if what you are is an interesting, funny, passionate person, why would you hide that? This is your opportunity to do that. There's some practical stuff, which I think you can see me doing now. Like, we sort of recommend that you have a fixed chair. I've got like a swingy chair here. Yeah. So even as I'm talking, I'm beginning to relax a little bit. You and I have known each other for years. I'm starting to lean back. I'm starting to slide. And actually, if this was an interview, I'd want something to control my posture a little bit more. So, get rid of, get straight chair, straight back. All of a sudden, you're forcing yourself into a posture that probably reflects how ready you want to be for the interview. So there are little things like that I think you can do to adjust your environment to make sure that all the preparation that you've done for the interview, all the brilliance that you have as a person, isn't, affected or detracted by what's happening around you.
Brilliant. And that's crucial. And one of the things you also mentioned, which I think is fantastic, is especially around the human connection. That's probably more so, especially now that face-to-face interviews are probably not really happening, really trying to almost emphasize or overdo trying to make sure there's that human connection as much as possible. That's probably something to definitely take away for those who are listening in. One of the things, just sort of going back a bit around your journey, what's been some of the best advice you've had, either going into interviews or after an interview?
Probably the thing to do is just to put the information in the format people want to hear it. So I think, we talk about the STAR technique for interviews. So when someone asks a question, you put it the situation. I was working in Wetherspoons. There was a task I needed to get out of Wetherspoons. I hated it. So, situation task, my action was I looked for another job. The result was I applied for another job. I interviewed well and I got to leave Wetherspoons. My reflection at the end is, maybe I could have not worked in Wetherspoons, but I actually needed to do that. The STAR structure, situation, task, action, result, and reflection is how people want to hear the answer. So it's an effective way of communicating the information you want to give, but also interviewers are trained to hear for that. And it doesn't mean you can't give a great answer that doesn't fit by that structure. But that's the structure you're being marked to. Do what they want to hear, in effect. And that's true as well of, if there's a firm that has corporate values, we're looking for people who are, so we're doing a program with NatWest at the moment. And they talk about people being change ready, in that they're able to be flexible, they're able to respond to a situation. Now, you may give an answer in an interview with NatWest where you're saying, I was in an environment, something went wrong, and rather than wait for another person to take the lead, what I did, I planned a response and we got it done. If you're going to give that answer, say, I showed that I was change ready by. So they've given you the words they're looking for. And I think a lot of people know this from writing exams. There are those words that the examiners are looking for. And it's important to get those terms across. So find out what the language is they want to hear. Find out what the structure is they want to get their information. And then just put the information in the way they want to hear it. And that just shows that you're really well prepared.
And it's really interesting you say that, because in episode 1, we were talking with Mark Hunter. He alluded to the same thing when he got a job. It was because he mentioned something that related to the organization. I think it might be the value that really tipped it for him. So that's a crucial point in terms of if it's a value that you've seen on there, or values that you've seen on the website, for example, or words that they use, like you said, being change ready, for example, then use them. Don't be afraid to do so.
They often give you all the answers anyway.
Yeah.
Where this tips over into the nature of the work we do is occasionally there are hidden codes and behaviors that are there to exclude people. And I think what good firms are doing is recognizing that this shouldn't be, did my dad play golf with you? Which is obviously, the way that you keep different people out of working environments, to make it truly democratic and easily accessible. And one of the ways you do that is you have criteria that aren't about who you know, but actually about the information that you can find out, research, prepare yourself for, and then communicate in an interview. And that's how you make sure you get the best from all backgrounds, and not just people who all know each other. So that's the work that you and I have done together on this program for years. It's about recognizing that there are brilliant people everywhere. Talent is equally distributed. Opportunity isn't. So what we do is about making sure that talent is connected to that opportunity, by preparing young people to go into the interview, be the best version of themselves, and nail the job.
Brilliant. And just sort of changing gears slightly, in terms of the most common questions you've been asked on an interview, obviously it's probably changed over the years. From
you talk about how incredibly old I am.
We'll keep that quiet. Even for myself.
Well, I think there are things that give everybody problems. Every interview opens with, "Tell me about yourself." Yeah. And that's one of those things that becomes like impossibly large if you're not prepared for it. Like, where did you begin? I was born on a Tuesday. My mom said it was raining. And I was primary school. And you need to have a sort of really well-honed self-mythology. This is the story of who I am, without the things that aren't important. So in my case, I'm the eldest of 7. That's a huge part of who I grew up to become. Anybody who's an elder sibling.
Maybe that's partly why we get on so well. I'm a 5th in 7, so 7 is a common number.
Big families are, So you know all of the messiness and none of the responsibility, right? You've got no idea what you're talking about. When I tell that story, that's one of the ways you make a personal connection, because you and I, we both have big families. We've talked about that before. But what you're saying when you talk about being the eldest of 7 is, I was in effect born to responsibility. Yeah. These were things I had to do for quite a young age, because nobody looked after all 7 of their kids on their own. It always fell on the first few kids. So what I've developed over time is an idea of who I am. It isn't really all of me, but it's good enough for a 30-second answer. And everybody going for an interview, I really recommend, think about if the question was, "Tell me about yourself," or worse, "Tell me something interesting about you." And everyone's like, "Well, I'm not interested. I'm just a person." And we have that conversation with our young people all the time. And then after knowing them for a month, they're like, "Oh, so I helped out my youth centre every evening, actually. And I also helped write funding bids because we needed to fix the roof because there was rain damage." And I'm like, why am I only finding this out now? It should be the first line of your CV. It should be everything you ever give. And a bit of it is people don't know what's interesting about them. Yeah. One of the ways you can do this is talk to your friends, if you trust them. Talk to your parents. What's good about me? Yeah. What are the things about me that you are really proud of? What are the things I've done that make you proud of me? And I'm sure you have this conversation with parents. I have it mine. The things my parents remember that I've done, that they bring up, that they're clearly proud. And I was like, was that big a deal? because I did it, so I didn't give it that value. Let other people tell you why you're great and help that be part of your answer. The other critical thing to get across here is a question which is less prevalent, but it's still out there. What's your greatest weakness?
I was going to say that. Yeah, that's quite common now. Yeah.
Horrendous trap. I set fires. I don't like waking up. Like you don't actually give the real answer. And yet if you're not prepared, and this is a way in which interviews can exclude people, everybody who's been trained knows that the answer to what's your greatest weakness is never the truth. It's never, well, I don't really want to do this job, but I need the money. It's you reframe a thing that used to be a problem as how you've changed it. And it's fundamentally a deceptive question because they don't really want to know. They either want to hear, well, I used to have problems managing my workload, but then I went on this conference and I read this book and actually I've understand how to prioritize things into urgent and important. And, I've really addressed that issue. So you have answered the question. You've talked about what you can do well now. And I think particularly early in my career and with the young people I work with, they're lovely, honest people. And they're like, well, I'm not really sure if I want to do this my whole life, but I've got to give it a crack. And it just means you don't get that job. So it comes back to my other point. This is the only job you ever wanted, the only firm you ever wanted to work for. And that's the most important thing to communicate. And if you get asked, what's your greatest weakness? I work too hard. Occasionally I ignore my family because I'm just working so incredibly hard. Those are the answers that people have been trained know to give. And I think there's a real frailty where honest, good faith answers don't do well because they don't really understand what the question is about.
Brilliant. Pete, there's been so much that you've been able to draw out around interviews and, they're always changing. Some of the questions that might be asked and phrased, but they're pretty much similar in some degrees. There are some that will always come up. And I think anyone who listens to this video will definitely be encouraged and hopefully better prepared for what might be some of their interviews, remotely, and little tips that they can take away. Are there any sort of lasting remarks that you'd like to give or tips that you think would really help those who listen in?
Yeah, on probably a me, more philosophical point, but I think it's important to do. I've been unemployed before. Like I know what looking for work is like. It's really hard. Looking for a job is a job. It takes discipline. It takes commitment. The important thing to realize is people are not just what they do. Everybody is more than their job. They're the people they love, the things they enjoy doing, the way they want to spend their time. But when you don't have a job, you can feel like you're losing that. It feels that all you are is what you're not looking for.
Yeah.
When you're looking for work, you've got to give yourself a break. You have to do the things you love doing, and you need to find moments for joy because otherwise it can become overwhelming. And in being overwhelmed, it means you interview less well. You're tired, you're fraught, you're worried about it. When one is so I was unemployed for 8 months and doing some sort of sessional work as a sports coach, which became beginning my career, and I ended up being very lucky. I remember that time as being a time where I didn't look after myself well enough because I was really worried about getting a job, and everything else began to narrow into this focus of just finding a job.
Yeah.
Work is important. Money is important. There are things that you enjoy doing that you don't need money to do. There are people you love hanging out with that you can hang out with. Take those times, do that sort of self-care bit, and it means that you'll be a much better interviewer and much more likely to get the job. So you might be feeling pressure, young people here, your parents are shouting you to get a job. Do what you need to get a job, but you're allowed to go out and do the things you enjoy as well. I mean, particularly right now when no one's allowed to go anywhere or do anything. If there is a moment to take joy, you should absolutely do it, and you should prioritize it whenever you can when you're looking for work.
Fantastic. Pete, it's been an absolute pleasure. And for those who are listening, please check out Leadership Through Sport and Business website, where there are loads and loads of opportunities, apprenticeships, fantastic opportunities. Cannot speak highly enough of the charity. And as I said, we've had a long-standing relationship, and it's been great seeing all the young people have been successful through many different interview processes. So please do check it out. But Pete, look, enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you once again for your time on the training ground.
Always happy to help.
Take care for now. Bye.